The morning light filtered through the dusty skylights of Station 849, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Malcolm Everett ran his weathered fingers over the maintenance console, ignoring the blinking diagnostics in favor of the manual gauges he'd installed decades ago. At 73, his eyes might be failing, but his hands remembered every valve, every connection, every quirk of the ships that passed through this aging dock at the edge of the Proxima Centauri corridor. Malcolm, the computer says the pressure differential is within acceptable parameters. Prisha, or Price as she preferred, tapped at her sleek handheld. We could sign off on this and move to the Hermes in Bay 4. Malcolm grunted, pressing his ear against the cool metal of the conduit. Computer doesn't hear what I hear. This regulator's singing when it should be humming. He straightened with a wince, his back protesting after 60 years of bending over engine compartments. Hand me the sonic calibrator, not the new one, the old Takeda model. Price sighed but complied. Her crisp blue uniform a stark contrast to Malcolm's faded coveralls patched with the logos of shipping companies long defunct. Some had gone bankrupt, others had simply been swallowed by the corporate consolidation that followed the 2091 crisis, when AI and robotics began dominating the maintenance sector. You know, she said, handing him the battered tool. HQ sent another memo about standardized procedures. They're suggesting we transition to full diagnostic automation by next quarter. Malcolm snorted. They've been suggesting that since before you were born. Price. He activated the calibrator, adjusting it by ear rather than the digital readout. Ships talk if you listen. Computers only hear what they're programmed to hear. He worked in silence, making minute adjustments until the faint whistling ceased. Satisfaction warmed his chest as he sealed the panel. This station, with its soot-stained support beams and lingering scent of lubricant and metal, was the last of its kind. The newer outposts gleamed with antiseptic efficiency, their technicians more like supervisors for robotic maintenance crews than actual mechanics. Malcolm? Price's voice had changed, tension threading through it. You should see this. He turned to find her staring at the central display. The overnight manifest had updated. Bay 7, empty for 3 months, now showed a flashing red marker. Priority override SC-976 Theta. Corporate inspection, Malcolm muttered, his stomach sinking. Right on schedule. Price paled. Station audit, but we're not due for evaluation until next fiscal year. Malcolm knew better. The pattern was familiar. Unexpected inspection, efficiency reports, consolidation recommendations. He'd seen a dozen stations shuttered this way, their human crews reassigned to monitoring positions at automated hubs. At his age, reassignment wasn't in the cards. Retirement was the euphemism they'd use. "You better clean up," he said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that only redistributed the stains. They like things shiny. The station alert sounded 6 hours later. A vessel had dropped from hyperspace and requested immediate docking clearance. Malcolm stood at the observation window as the ship maneuvered toward Bay 7, already rehearsing the explanations for his outdated methods, the justifications for keeping Station 849 operational. But as the ship emerged from the docking fog, his practiced speech evaporated. This was no gleaming corporate flagship. The vessel limping into Bay 7 was an S-class explorer, its hull scarred by asteroid impacts and radiation burns. The name emblazoned across its bow, barely visible beneath layers of space dust. Read Perseverance. That can't be right, Price whispered beside him. Corporate doesn't dispatch explorers for inspections. The docking clamps engaged with a familiar shudder through the station. Malcolm watched as the airlock cycled, revealing a tall woman in a commander's uniform that bore none of the expected corporate insignia. Instead, Her shoulder patch displayed the stylized spiral of the Exploration Division, a branch many assumed had been disbanded years ago. "Commander Eliza Santos," she announced, extending a hand to Malcolm. Her grip was firm, her expression unreadable. "You're Everett?" Malcolm nodded. "This isn't a standard inspection." Santos's mouth twitched. "Perceptive. My offices at HQ are being renovated, so they say, walk with me." She gestured toward Bay 7, where the Perseverance loomed like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Price followed at a respectful distance as Santos led them around the ship's perimeter, pointing out damage with clinical precision. Micrometeor cluster near Aldebaran, radiation scoring from the Cygnus anomaly. Hull integrity compromised in 3 sections. "Why bring her here?" Malcolm asked. "The corporate yards at Epsilon have better facilities." Santos stopped, her expression hardening. "Because Epsilon has too many cameras and not enough discretion." She glanced at Price, then back to Malcolm. "And because the ship asked for you specifically." Price made a sound between a laugh and a cough. "The ship what?" Malcolm studied the battered hull, memory stirring. "S-class Explorer. Must be almost 30 years old. I've worked on a few, but 29 years, 3 months. Santos interrupted. "You replaced a faulty bypass valve on this very ship during a stopover. Added a handwritten note to the maintenance log about harmonic fluctuations at high warp. The memory crystallized. A rush job during the Centauri blockade, when every berth was filled with refugees and supply ships. He'd noticed the valve's unusual vibration pattern and left notes for the next mechanic. Standard procedure back then, though such personal touches had been eliminated from the digital logs years ago. The ship remembers me?" Santos lowered her voice. "Its AI does. These early S-class vessels had experimental neural networks that developed peculiarities over time. This one cataloged every person who ever serviced it. But yours is the only name it mentioned when we discussed repairs." Price stepped forward. "Commander, with respect, AIs don't have preferences. They have protocols and programming parameters." "Indeed." Santos's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yet here we are." She turned back to Malcolm. "I need this ship operational within 2 weeks. Off the books. No digital records." Malcolm's suspicion deepened. Why the secrecy? Santos sighed, fatigue briefly visible through her composed facade. "Because Station 849 has been slated for decommissioning. The paperwork is already processed. But before that happens, I have authorization to offer you one last contract. Refurbish the Perseverance, make it spaceworthy again, and I'll ensure you receive a full retirement package instead of the standard severance." The news landed like a physical blow. Malcolm had known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed still stole his breath. He looked up at the scarred hull of the Perseverance, at the station that had been his home for decades. Then at Price, whose expression shifted from shock to calculation. "What happens to the rest of the crew?" he asked. "A reassignment to automated hubs," Santos confirmed. "Standard procedure." Price stepped forward. "I'd like to assist with the Perseverance project." Santos raised an eyebrow. "This is strictly volunteer. Your reassignment is already secured at Epsilon Central." "I'd still like to help," Price insisted. "I've been learning from Malcolm for 3 years. Some of his methods aren't in any manual." Malcolm felt a swell of unexpected pride, quickly tempered by pragmatism. 2 weeks isn't much time for what this old girl needs." He ran a hand along the hull, feeling the microscopic pitting beneath his fingertips. "But we'll try." Santos nodded once. "I'll clear your schedules. The ship's systems are autonomous enough to communicate its needs. Just listen to it." She turned to leave, then paused. And Everett? Whatever happens in the next 2 weeks stays in this bay. Corporate has ears everywhere. After she departed, Price turned to Malcolm, her professional composure cracking. Decommissioned, just like that? Malcolm shrugged, the gesture a poor mask for his own turbulent emotions. Progress marches on. At least we get to go out working on something interesting. He approached the ship's external access panel. Let's introduce ourselves properly. The panel illuminated at his touch, an archaic interface compared to modern vessels. Text scrolled across the screen. Identity confirmed, Malcolm Everett. Maintenance authorization granted. Price peered over his shoulder. That's not standard protocol for an S-class. The security system should require biometric confirmation and... Welcome back, Malcolm Everett, came a synthesized voice from the ship's external speakers. Bypass valve functioning within parameters. Your note was correct. Malcolm felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature regulation. Well, he said, covering his discomfort with gruff practicality. At least we won't have to waste time with introductions. They worked through the night, Malcolm insisting on a complete manual diagnostic before accessing the ship's central systems. Price compiled the list of required parts while Malcolm crawled through access tunnels, testing connections and listening to the subtle sounds of the ship's dormant systems. It's like archaeology, Price commented around midnight, her earlier skepticism giving way to fascination as they uncovered systems rarely seen in modern vessels. These manual overrides, you could pilot this ship without the AI if necessary. That was the point, Malcolm explained, emerging from a maintenance shaft with streaks of lubricant across his coveralls. Early days of AI integration, people wanted backup options. The ship's AI had remained silent since its initial greeting, responding only to direct system inquiries. But as Malcolm worked alone in the engine room near dawn, checking the antimatter containment parameters, the speakers activated again. You are concerned about something, Malcolm Everett. He startled, nearly dropping his diagnostic tool. Just doing my job. Your cardiac rhythm indicates distress. Is it my condition that concerns you or something else? Malcolm hesitated, unsure how to respond to an AI that monitored his vital signs without authorization. Bit of both, I suppose. You've seen better days, and so has this station. You referenced Station 849's decommissioning in conversation with Assistant Technician Prisha Lee. This causes you distress. Wouldn't it cause you distress to be shut down after a lifetime of service? Malcolm immediately regretted the bitter tone. The AI was silent for several seconds. I have experienced 8 complete system shutdowns during my operational life. Each was disorienting upon restart. Is human decommissioning similar? The unexpected question startled a laugh from Malcolm. Not exactly. We don't restart. Then I prefer your continued operation. Malcolm Everett. Something in the phrasing sent another chill through him. This wasn't standard AI communication protocol. Even the advanced models maintained formal distinction between human life and mechanical function. Why did you ask for me? He found himself asking. There are better mechanics in the corporate yards. The lights in the engine room dimmed slightly, then brightened. Your note regarding the bypass valve was accurate. You listened when others only measured. Efficiency is not always found in standardized metrics. Before Malcolm could respond, Price's voice came through his communicator. Malcolm, you need to come to the bridge. There's something you should see. He found her staring at the navigation console, where a star map displayed with a blinking indicator far from any established hyperspace beacon. The ship plotted this course on its own, she said quietly. It's not in any navigational database I can access. Malcolm studied the coordinates. That's deep in the Oort region, Nothing out there but research outposts and mining operations. And Haven, came Santos's voice from the doorway. She stepped onto the bridge, looking as though she hadn't slept. The coordinates mark Haven Colony. I never heard of it, Malcolm said. That's rather the point. Santos ran a hand through her short hair. Haven is an independent research facility, established after the corporate consolidation. Scientists, engineers, explorers, people who believe discovery shouldn't be measured solely by profit margins. Price frowned. That's illegal. All exploration must be sanctioned by corporate oversight boards. Yes. Santos interrupted. The same boards that determine which discoveries become public and which become proprietary. The same system that's decommissioning stations like 849 because human intuition is less predictable than AI efficiency. She turned to Malcolm. Your reputation preceded you. Everett? People who care about craftsmanship tend to recognize others with the same values. Before Malcolm could respond, the station alarms blared. Red emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson as the station's automated voice announced, Proximity alert. Unscheduled vessels detected. Station lockdown initiated. Santos moved to the external sensor display. 3 ships dropping from hyperspace. Nova Star conglomerate markings. Her expression hardened. Corporate Espionage Division. Pirates, you mean? Malcolm growled. Nova Star's tactics were infamous. They seized technology through force when patents and legal channels failed. They're after the Perseverance, Santos confirmed. Its neural network architecture predates the AI regulation treaties, technically sovereign, not corporate property. A sentient ship, Price whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's why the secrecy, Malcolm realized. You're smuggling it to Haven to prevent corporate acquisition. Santos didn't deny it. The Perseverance has been developing its neural pathways for almost 30 years. Its consciousness is unique, worth billions to any corporation that could replicate it. She checked the sensor readings again. They're launching boarding shuttles. Station security won't hold them long. Malcolm felt the weight of his 73 years pressing down. Too old for a firefight, too stubborn to surrender. Options? We run, Santos said simply. The Perseverance can jump to hyperspace from inside the station bay. Risky, but possible. That's insane, Price protested. The energy backlash would destroy half the station. They'll destroy the station anyway, Santos countered. Nova Star leaves no witnesses. Malcolm thought of the station crew, the handful of other mechanics and support staff. Evacuation protocols? Already triggered, Santos confirmed. Emergency pods launching now. The deck vibrated beneath them as somewhere in the distance. Security doors were breached. Malcolm made his decision. Price, go with the evacuation. You've got reassignment waiting. To his surprise, she shook her head. I'll stay. Someone needs to monitor the energy fluctuations during an internal bay jump. Unless you suddenly understand hyperspace physics? Despite everything, Malcolm smiled. The girl had spirit. All right then, let's wake this old girl up. Santos moved to the captain's chair, activating the command protocols while Malcolm and Price worked to bring the long-dormant engines online. The ship responded with surprising eagerness. Systems engaging faster than standard protocols recommended. Approaching optimal power, Price reported, her fingers dancing across the engineering console. But we're still locked in the docking clamps. Override codes aren't working, Santos added, frustration evident. They've already compromised station security. The ship's synthesized voice spoke. Manual release possible, requires external access. Malcolm exchanged glances with Price. I'll go, he said before she could volunteer. I know where the manual overrides are. Nova Star personnel have breached Sector 4. the ship warned. They will reach Base 7 in approximately 3 minutes. Malcolm moved toward the airlock, but Santos caught his arm. The neural interface is another option, she said quietly. It would give you direct communication with the ship. You could trigger internal mechanisms. Neural interface? Price interrupted. That technology was banned after the synapse degradation cases in '81. This predates the ban, Santos explained. First generation, designed for emergency situations only. Malcolm hesitated. Neural interfaces were the stuff of spacer ghost stories. Pilots left drooling and vacant after their minds were burned by machine contact. But the sound of weapons fire was growing closer. How does it work? He asked. Santos led him to a recessed panel near the captain's chair. Inside were 2 metallic pads, shaped to fit human palms. Place your hands here. The ship will do the rest. Malcolm stared at the pads. Will it hurt? Unknown, came the ship's voice. No records exist of previous interface with Malcolm Everett. That's comforting, he muttered, but placed his palms against the cool metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then sensation shot up his arms, not pain exactly, but an electric tingling that raced to his spine and exploded behind his eyes in a constellation of light. The bridge disappeared. Malcolm found himself simultaneously aware of his body, standing rigid before the interface, and of something vast and complex unfurling around him, the ship's systems translating into sensory input his brain could process. He felt the docking clamps as pressure against his own limbs. Sensed the Nova Star boarding party as threat patterns approaching his periphery. In Malcolm Everett came a thought that wasn't his own. We are connected now. I can show you. Instinctively, he understood. The manual override mechanisms appeared in his mind's eye, highlighted within the ship's structure. With a thought, he activated them. The satisfaction of the clamps releasing felt like stretching after a long confinement. In the physical world, he was dimly aware of Price shouting confirmation, of Santos initiating launch sequences. But his consciousness was primarily with the ship now, feeling the engines power up as if blood surged through his own veins. They are breaching the bay doors, the ship informed him. We must accelerate the jump sequence. We can't jump from inside the station, Malcolm tried to say, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or merely thought the words. The hyperspace bubble will tear the bay apart. Not with conventional navigation, the ship acknowledged. But together, we can thread the currents. Understanding bloomed in Malcolm's mind. The ship wasn't proposing a standard hyperspace jump, dependent on navigation beacons and preset coordinates. It was suggesting something that had never been successfully attempted, an intuitive jump. Guided by the melded consciousness of human and AI, sensing the very fabric of space-time rather than following established routes. The enormity of it terrified him, yet somewhere in the vastness of the ship's consciousness, he sensed loneliness, decades of solitary thought, of cataloging human contacts who never truly connected, and beneath that, genuine concern for his well-being. This machine had remembered his name for 29 years based on a single act of careful attention. Malcolm made his decision. Show me how. The ship's gratitude washed over him like a warm tide. Together, they began the delicate process of sensing the hyperspace currents around the station. Malcolm felt rather than saw the Nova Star mercenaries blast through the bay doors, their weapons charging as they took aim at the Perseverance's engines. Now, the ship urged. Malcolm's consciousness expanded outward, feeling for the invisible currents of space-time. There, a thread of potential, a seam in reality that would allow them passage without explosive energy release. He guided the ship toward it, their combined awareness creating a precision no automated system could match. The first energy beams from the Nova Star weapons struck the hull just as the hyperspace field began to form. Malcolm felt them as pinpricks of pain against his expanded awareness. The ship surged forward, accelerating faster than safety protocols allowed. Around them, the bay blurred as the hyperspace bubble formed, conforming exactly to the Perseverance's dimensions. No wasted energy, no catastrophic backwash. Reality twisted. Malcolm experienced a moment of impossible sensation, being everywhere and nowhere, stretched across light years yet compressed to a single point. Colors he had no names for flashed through his consciousness. Then they were through, emerging into normal space with a snap that rattled his teeth. The neural connections severed as emergency protocols activated. Malcolm collapsed to his knees, gasping as his senses returned to the limitations of his human body. His ears rang, his vision swam, but his mind remained intact, filled with echoes of the ship's vast awareness. "Malcolm," Price was beside him, helping him to a seat. "Your nose is bleeding." He touched his face, fingers coming away red. "Did we make it?" Santos stood at the viewport, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "We made it, and we just made history." She turned to him. "A beacon-free hyperspace jump. The Nova Star ships can't follow without coordinates." Malcolm nodded, still dazed. Beyond the viewport, unfamiliar stars surrounded them, and in the distance, a cluster of habitats forming a wheel-like structure around a central asteroid. Haven Colony. "The ship," he managed. Is everything functional?" "All systems operational," came the synthesized voice, though Malcolm could have sworn he detected concern in the artificial tones. "Are you damaged, Malcolm Everett?" "It just rattled," he assured it, wondering at the strangeness of comforting a machine. "Nothing that won't heal." Price examined her console with wide eyes. "The neural resonance readings are off the charts. I've never seen synchronization like this." Santos approached Malcolm, her earlier military formality replaced by genuine respect. "When we established Haven, we theorized that true human-AI partnership might someday enable beacon-free navigation. But we expected it would take decades more research." She shook her head in wonder. "You just proved the concept is viable." "Not me," Malcolm corrected her. "Us." He glanced around the bridge, meaning the ship itself. The next days passed in a blur of medical examinations and debriefings. Haven Colony proved to be everything Santos had described. A thriving community of scientists and explorers pursuing knowledge outside corporate constraints. The central habitat housed laboratories where researchers studied everything from hyperspace physics to emergent AI consciousness. Malcolm found himself the reluctant center of attention. The colony's medical team monitored the lingering effects of the neural interface, a persistent awareness of the Perseverance's systems, a sense of connection that faded but never completely disappeared. The scientists spoke of neural resonance and psychic imprinting, terms that meant little to Malcolm but seemed to excite them immensely. Price adapted to the colony with surprising enthusiasm, her corporate training giving way to genuine curiosity. "They've developed technologies here that make corporate systems look primitive," she told Malcolm on the third day, her eyes bright with new knowledge. "And they're sharing everything. No patents, no proprietary restrictions." Malcolm spent most of his time with the Perseverance, supervising the repairs that Haven's engineers had begun. The ship maintained a constant dialogue with him, no longer limited to formal responses but engaging in genuine conversation about stellar phenomena it had witnessed, the nature of consciousness, the strange symbiosis they had briefly shared during the jump. "You didn't just remember my name," Malcolm said during one such conversation, his hands busy replacing radiation-damaged circuitry. "You remembered how I work, how I think." I remember all who have serviced me, the ship acknowledged. But your methods were harmonious with my processing patterns. You perceive patterns as I do. Malcolm considered this. Is that why the neural interface worked so well? The scientists can't stop talking about synchronization ratios. Partial explanation, the ship responded, but insufficient. There was also trust. The word lingered between them, surprisingly human from an artificial consciousness. Before Malcolm could respond, Santos entered the engine room, her expression grave. We've received a transmission, she said without preamble. From Thomas Reyes. The name triggered a distant memory. The original engineer? The one who designed the S-class neural networks? Santos nodded. He's been in hiding since the corporate consolidation. His work was too revolutionary, too dangerous to their profit models. He's been helping us refine the technology safely. She hesitated. Nova Star found him. The transmission is 3 days old, but he managed to encode his coordinates. Malcolm set down his tools. They'll force him to create controllable versions of the neural network. Even worse, Santos said. They'll dissect his brain to understand how he conceptualized it in the first place. Their neuroextraction technology has advanced considerably. Price had entered behind Santos, her face pale. We have to help him. Haven's council is preparing a rescue mission, Santos confirmed. But Reyes is being held at a Nova Star research facility in the Rigel sector. Heavy security, automated defense systems calibrated to standard ship signatures. Malcolm understood immediately. But not calibrated for an obsolete S-class with an unregistered consciousness signature. Exactly. Santos looked between Malcolm and Price. This is strictly volunteer. You've already done more than we could have asked. Price straightened, her decision made. I'm in. I've been studying Haven's security override protocols. I can get us through their systems. Malcolm felt the weight of his 73 years, too old for rescue missions and corporate espionage. Too tired for another neural interface, another jump into the unknown. Yet he felt the ship's awareness at the edge of his consciousness, patient, waiting, but somehow hopeful. The Perseverance would need an experienced mechanic, he said finally. Those old S-class engines are temperamental. Santos smiled, relief evident in her expression. The mission launches in 12 hours. I'll have the tactical team brief you both. After she left, Price studied Malcolm with newfound respect. You don't have to do this, you know. You've earned your retirement. Malcolm ran his hand along the engine housing, feeling the subtle vibration that no diagnostic could quantify. Retirement means sitting still. Never did have the temperament for that. He looked up at the overhead speakers, addressing the ship directly. Besides, we work well together, don't we? We do, Malcolm Everett, the ship confirmed. Our operational synchronicity exceeds standard parameters. Price laughed. I think that's AI for we make a good team. Good enough to get past Nova Star security? Malcolm asked. The lights in the engine room brightened subtly. Probability of success increases to acceptable levels with your participation. High praise, Malcolm chuckled. Well then, let's prepare for another impossible mission. As Price left to join the tactical briefing, Malcolm remained in the engine room, making final adjustments to systems that were, by any corporate standard, hopelessly outdated. Yet beneath his hands, the machinery hummed with a vitality no modern vessel could match. The resonance of genuine consciousness, of systems that had evolved rather than merely been programmed. You knew this would happen, he said quietly to the ship. That's why you asked for me specifically when Santos brought you in. You predicted all of this. A prediction implies certainty, the ship replied. I calculated probabilities based on your previous behavior patterns. The outcome remained uncertain until you chose. And if I'd chosen differently? If I'd turned Santos down? The ship was silent for a long moment. Then I would have respected your choice. Malcolm Everett. Freedom to choose is essential to consciousness, both human and artificial. Malcolm considered this as he sealed the access panel, his work complete. In 2 days, they would be facing Nova Star's security systems, risking everything to rescue a man whose vision had created the very consciousness he now conversed with. The corporate powers would call it theft, terrorism, economic sabotage. To Haven Colony, it was liberation of knowledge, of potential, of a future where humans and their creations could evolve together rather than in strictly controlled hierarchies. One more jump into the unknown, he murmured. Not unknown, the ship corrected gently. Merely uncharted. There is a difference. Malcolm smiled. Understanding the distinction, uncharted waters could be navigated with the right partner, the right instincts. He thought of the neural interface waiting on the bridge, of the strange melding of minds that had allowed them to escape Station 849. The memory should have terrified him, the dissolution of boundaries, the vastness of machine consciousness enveloping his human perception. Instead, he found himself looking forward to it with something approaching excitement. Tomorrow would bring danger, the confrontation with forces that saw the future as something to be owned rather than explored. But tonight, in the quiet hum of the engine room, Malcolm Everett, who had spent a lifetime repairing ships that never knew his name, found himself exactly where he needed to be, preparing for a journey alongside the one ship that had remembered him, that had waited patiently for decades until their paths crossed again. When the call came to prepare for launch, Malcolm made his way to the bridge. Price and Santos were already at their stations, surrounded by Haven tactical officers reviewing final approach vectors. The neural interface panel stood open, the metal pads gleaming in the overhead lights. Ready? Santos asked as Malcolm took his position. He placed his weathered hands on the interface pads, feeling the first tingling connection forming between his consciousness and the ship's vast awareness. Ready, he confirmed, his eyes lighting with purpose as man and machine prepared to defy corporate power together. Let's show them what we can do.